Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are jumping into a couple beers from Brewers. I've never tried anything from on either of them, and we are jumping into the wonderful, wonderful world of barley wines. And today's are not just run-of-the-mill barley wines. No, these are barrel-aged barley wines and different types of barrels. So we've got beers I've never had from any brewer, from either brewer here. First beer I've ever had from either, and we're jumping straight to barley wines and barrel-aged versions of that, at that. So to start, we're going to jump over to 50 West Brewing Company's Remus's Revenge 10 and 2. This is a bourbon barrel-aged barley wine that clocks in at 12.5% ABV. 50 West Brewing Company is based in Cincinnati, Ohio. For beer number 2, we're jumping over to Varietal Beer Company's Sovereign of Nockmaar. This is a whiskey barrel-aged barley wine that clocks in at 13.8% ABV, and Varietal Beer Company is based in Sunnyside, Washington. So we're jumping straight into two new beers from two new brewers to me. Barley wines, barrel-aged at that. So I think I'm in for a treat, and I certainly invite you along as we take ourselves on this magical journey into the land of barley wine. I can't wait. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in with 50 West Brewing Company's Remus's Revenge 10 and 2 that clocks in at 12.5% ABV. Hello friends. Today we're going to start the amazing, magical, fantastic journey through barrel-aged barley wine. I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am. It is my absolute favorite beer style of them all. It is the absolute king daddy, biggest, boldest, most complex layered beer style that there is. If you've never had a barley wine, they are hard to find. They are expensive, but it's well worth trying at least once. And it's one of those beer styles kind of akin to sours, though they're nothing like a sour. But the commonality they share is there's really nobody that's on the fence about barley wines. You either love them or you don't really care for them. So it's going to go one way or the other as a rule. There's always exceptions, but it is my favorite beer style of all. And very exciting to jump into a brand new brewer and have a first beer to be an incredible barrel-aged barley wine. I'm very fortunate, yet again, Tavour coming through with helping me find barley wines. So today we're starting with 50 West Brewing Company. This is called Remus's Revenge 10 and 2. It is bourbon barrel aged. This one clocks in specifically at 12.5% ABV. 50 West Brewing Company is based in Cincinnati, Ohio. This beer specifically has won awards at both the Great American Beer Festival and the World Beer Cup. So I have to assume that I'm about to be getting into something special. Barley wine always is. But you know, they're all distinctly different, just like any other beer. So let's start with label art. This, a super, super clean design. It's got kind of a copper foil color on this label, and I know the camera, there's no reality it can pick it up. If you rotate it in the light, you can see that it's not just a solid kind of charcoal color background here. There's actually this really intricate design that's got a lighter kind of charcoal shade that's popping behind the label. So really big fan of the label design and art there. It looks really nice. Nice wax dip bottle. So we got our trusty pointy bottle opener here. As always, we will score directly under the edge of the cap all the way around. We're just trying to get us a place to be able to grip to get this cap off. So with any luck, I'll be able to get it on the first pull. This wax is quite thick, so maybe not, but let's just get it wedged in there. Got it right off. No problems at all. Okay, bottle is cracked. Let's get this poured. Oh, there we go. This is an absolute classic textbook barley wine appearance. It is that dark caramelly kind of ambery color. That is exactly what I expect to see with a barley wine. They can be different colors, but this is very much the norm. So we've got that in there, a little sediment poured in, not a problem. Yeah, looks beautiful. Nice caramel color. I can tell you the aroma is absolutely massive. It is pungent. If I set that there and sit back, I can still smell it. And that's now probably 3-4 feet from my face. Incredible aroma. Head formed beautifully. Let's jump right in, right over and give it a proper sniff. Oh, oh man. I love barley wine so much. Okay, so no real surprises here. The bourbon comes through very clearly, and basically every textbook aroma you might find in a barley wine is present here. There's a ton of toffee. There's a ton of caramel. There's a ton of dark, rich fruit, almost reminding you of caramelized sugar fruit like in a baked good. There's figs, there's plums, there's notes of raisin, there's kind of apricot-y, kind of some stone fruit in the back. It just smells absolutely delicious and incredibly complex. So without further ado, let's jump right in and see what this one's about. Oh, oh, there it is. There it is. It's so rare that a barley wine disappoints. I've had some I prefer to others, but I gotta say this one is positively delicious. Very big, bold, pungent flavors, as I anticipated. First thing I noticed as I was swishing around the palate, one, the mouthfeel is a bit thicker than your average barley wine. It's got a bit more resistance. The body is weighty, but it's not super heavy like a super big, thick stout. So really, the body feels where I expected it to be for a barley wine. The mouthfeel surprises me. They're not normally quite that resistant, but this one does have quite a good bit of resistance to it. It's almost presents this chewy-like quality. When you agitate around the palate, it doesn't get creamy. Really, all that happens is you can just feel how thick this beer is. It's quite thick for a barley wine. In terms of what happens upon first sip, the very first thing that hits you is the same thing that happens flavor-wise that you detect when you start to agitate. It is just this incredible warming sensation that's partially due to the higher ABV and largely due to the bourbon barrel aging. And I gotta say, whatever bourbon barrels they used, really quality. I don't know if they used a specific single barrel, if they did a blend of barrels, but whatever they did, it's absolutely fantastic. Immediately behind that, as is often the case with barley wines, you get just this big rush of the malt side. And first that came out was toffee, second was caramel. So it's kind of tiering flavor-wise and mirroring what I got in the aroma, kind of in the same order as well. Underneath that, yes, you do get these classic flavors you expect in a barley wine as well. So there is a fair bit of raisin, there's a lot of fig, there's a little bit of plum in there, various stone fruit, a lot of caramelized sugar. It's all rich. It's rich, dark fruit with sugary, caramelly residues with a bourbon barrel back, and it is positively delicious. So really, we've got a classic recipe for a barley wine here that has clearly been executed well. So far, I'm already a massive fan. It's doing proud by the beer style that I love the most. And for a first entry to this brewer that's new to me, man, if they brew everything they brew with the same attention to detail and love and care as they did this barley wine, I am absolutely going to have to keep my eyes peeled for more by 50 West Brewing Company. So let's jump in and examine the flavor profile again, make sure I'm not missing anything, and we're going to talk about the finish and exactly what I think that I possibly left on the table here. Immediate warmth, bourbon, toffee, caramel. Second sip, I'm getting some subtle grape-like notes, kind of a vinous quality, more akin to wine. Fig's really prevalent. The raisins are popping a bit more. There's definite plum, definite apricot. Some other rich fruit that tastes caramelized. There's a lot of layers of brown sugar, caramelized sugar. It tastes more like caramelized dark brown sugar to me. Elements of molasses without being quite as intense. Overall, just a classic barley wine recipe here that they positively nailed. And I can't emphasize this enough. The bourbon barrels that they chose, whatever they did, however long they put them in, the types of barrels, the brand, they picked quality, and it really does show. Bourbon barrels do pair very, very well with barley wines in my experience. This is no exception. So the finish. The finish on this one is quite long, and really the length of this one is not coming so much from the individual profiles that you get out of the barley wine beer itself. It's all being dominated and pushed out by this bourbon barrel. The bourbon intensity is very much at the forefront, and it's very, very, very long in the finish. It's just this lingering warmth and bourbon, little subtleties of vanilla you're getting from that barrel as well. And it's well over a minute on the end of each sip. I expect this is going to continue to intensify as I sip on this. This will take me a while. Big, big beer. Gotta say, I'm a massive fan here. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, count my scores. When we come back, we will get to beer number 2, and that is Varietal Beer Company's Sovereign of Nockmaar, the whiskey barrel barley wine that clocks in at 13.8% ABV. Okay, so now we continue our journey on today's barrel-aged barley wine review with Varietal Beer Company's Sovereign of Nockmaar. I'm going to reread that, make sure I'm not mispronouncing it. Sovereign of Nockmaar, 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 Sovereign of Nockmaar. So, again, another first beer from a brewer I've never tried before, and jumping straight into the fray. Barrel-aged barley wines, not a bad way to start for my money. This one is whiskey barrel-aged, 13.8% ABV on this one, and Varietal Beer Company is based in Sunnyside, Washington. So you can see, yet again, we've got us a nice wax-dipped cap. So we've got our same, going to score right under the edge of this cap. All the way around. Ooh, this wax seems quite a bit thicker. Yeah, quite a bit thicker. I'm going to see if I can just get a decent bit scored and match the score into a part I've already scored. That may make this slightly simpler. This feels like this is going to be tight. Really thick wax. Really, really thick wax. All right, so there's a possibility I cut out some of this since it's going to be time consuming and not that interesting watching me try to open a wax dip bottle. But I think I got roughly half of it. So let's just see if we can grip this right under the edge of the cap and get this off here. No, but it is trying to kind of release this wax. So I'm going to have to go a little bit deeper. All the way around, a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper, little bit deeper. Boy, this is seriously thick wax, seriously thick. Okay, we're gonna try again. So we can get right up under this and get this pried now. Not quite, almost there. There we go. Ooh, that was a real challenge, but we got it off. Nice thick wax on this one. In terms of label art, I'm guessing that this is Varietal's kind of logo there. Really cool looking, almost looks like an ancient rune or something. But it looks quite neat on the bottle. Nice bright yellow, kind of a goldish yellow foil. And it's imprinted over the hand. I doubt that the camera's going to pick that up particularly well, but trust me, it's there. It's got this interesting rune looking logo imprinted over a hand. Very cool looking. So without further ado, we're going to get this bad boy popped right in the glass. Oh, here we go. Another classic barley wine, ambery brown, caramel color. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Looks absolutely lovely. This one looks a bit more effervescent than the last. That is pretty common with barley wines. We've talked about this before. I've reviewed enough barley wines. Those of you that watch often probably know. Barley wines kind of run the gamut. You never really know what you're going to get in terms of what the head is going to do because the effervescence is so intense. Now I can tell you, just as with the last one, this is a very pungent aroma. I'm already getting it. I'm a good 1.5 feet away from this beer, and I'm already picking up not just the whiskey, but I'm starting to pick up undercurrents of what's going to lie in this specific barley wine. So this is settled. It's got a nice little tight ring on the outside, just a small little pad on top. That is classic barley wine by and large. Visually, maybe a little bit on the lighter side for a barley wine, but it's still certainly well in the average realm of the range. So let's get right up for a proper sniff. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's quite nice. So the whiskey really comes through on this. I don't know what specific type of whiskey barrel, again, or series of barrels that they used, but the whiskey is quite dominant. As well as that, on the nose, you get a slight little boozy hint, which obviously barrel aging, that is quite common. And I'm getting a good bit of the caramel and the toffee that really comes through in the malt bill. A little bit of underlying rich deep fruit, though it's a little harder to pick out exactly what it is I'm smelling in this one compared to the prior. It's kind of mishmashing. So it's very strong whiskey, really nice. Toffee, caramel, no question. And there's definitely rich fruit in there, but it's hard to pick out. So if I were a betting man, I would say when I jump into this and sip, there might be a slight vinous quality, might be a slight grape quality. There's going to be tons of caramel, tons of toffee, and there's probably going to be at least a good bit of fig-like quality, maybe some raisin-like quality, maybe some plum, maybe some apricot. It's always all over the board, but those are pretty typical for a barley wine. So without further ado, let's just jump right in and see what this one has in store for us. Looks great, smells great. Ooh, wow. The barrel on this one is even more intense than on the last one. Wow. Ooh, man. Oh, that's really nice. That's really nice. And I'll tell you, it's going to take me a minute because barley wines always develop over 5, 10, 15 seconds on that first sip to really process what I'm getting here. While I'm processing the subtlety, I can tell you that the initial reaction is almost identical to the last one. You swish around the palate. The very first thing is you get is that warming sensation from the barrel and certainly the ABV of the beer. This one even higher by 1.3%. This is 13.8. This is a big barley wine, very big barley wine. Barley wines are always big, but this one is big, even for a barley wine. That barrel is the first thing that hits you. That whiskey is quite prominent and it's extremely intense. And that's on the heels of that immediate warming sensation. As that opens up, really where this one goes is not so much into the underlying qualities that the yeast and the malt interact with those kind of fruit tones. They're there, but very, very dominant in this one is a lot more of that underlying toffee and caramel character that you more often than not, in fact, find in a barley wine. And it makes it feel that much richer for it. And I can tell you, whiskey just as with bourbon. Obviously, bourbon is whiskey. It's bourbon whiskey, but it's a really good barrel choice for barley wine. The natural flavors that are imparted by whiskeys and bourbon whiskeys really do pair well with the natural trait characteristics of a barley wine. So there's this slight buttery sense that comes through from the barley wine kind of really toffee side and mixing with that caramel. So it does put one in mind of buttered toffee is really what it reminds me of. I don't know if you've ever had the snack Crunch and Munch, their toffee flavor. That is really what barley wines, most of them, strongly remind me of. And let me tell you how well that specific character trait pairs with whiskey and or bourbon. It just goes hand in hand. This one, it's not bourbon, so it doesn't have quite that same vanilla forward character. There is a suggestion of it. But bourbons, I find in my experience, bourbon barrel aging and just drinking bourbons in general, you get a lot more of that vanilla character that comes out versus a standard whiskey. I mean, this could have been Scotch, it could have been Irish whiskey, it could have been American whiskey, I don't know. It could be Japanese whiskey, any whiskey from anywhere, but it does pair very well with a barley wine. So, in terms of body in the mouthfeel, this one's almost identical to the last one. The weight is pretty much exactly what I expected, and there's actually just a little bit more resistance, a little more viscosity than you get in your average barley wine. Some people would say a barley wine for its ABV feels flat. I disagree. It takes a lot of exposure to a lot of different beer styles, and barley wines specifically kind of get the nuances and traits. The color spectrum is quite easy to tag. The body in the mouthfeel is a little more challenging because people, I think, subconsciously, oh, a really high ABV beer, oh wow, that's not anywhere near as big, it's really kind of flat. No, it isn't flat. It feels exactly as it should. The body really does. It's robust. It's a big body. I wouldn't say it's a heavy body. for the beer style or for the ABV range, but it feels exactly right for a barley wine. Where this and the prior one differentiate themselves from the average barley wine is that their mouthfeel has a lot more resistance to it. That's not as common with a barley wine, but it's welcome. And it certainly sits well and fits with the beer and the beer style very well indeed, especially at these high ABVs we're talking about. So there's a lot to take in here. There's a lot of complexity. I really didn't have even that much time to process all of the subtleties of flavor, let alone dive into the finish. So we're going to take another sip, let these flavors intensify, and see exactly what I can pick out. Sip number 2. Once again, it's that incredible warming sensation and just an absolutely massive whiskey-forward flavor. That starts to open up. It opens up directly into toffee first, caramel second. It's very rich. This one's very, very rich. I think of Barleywines as a good dessert beer. It's definitely a beer you sip on for a long time, not only due to its flavor profiles and characteristics, but obviously it's very high ABV. This is not a chugging or a slamming beer. It's meant to be enjoyed over multiple hours. A bottle of this size, easily 3 hours I'm going to be sipping on this one. So behind the toffee and the caramel, that's when you start to get this suggestion of slight grapiness, slight raisin-like qualities, but I will differentiate. It tastes more like a white grape or green grape raisin compared to a red grape raisin. It's the lighter variety. It's a little more astringently acidic. That's what I'm getting in this compared to their red counterparts, which are a bit deeper, a bit richer. There's not a ton of plum-like qualities, but there are some prune-like qualities, and there is indeed a little bit of a figginess to the back. And that really binds with that toffee and that caramel. That's very common for barley wine, and it's definitely present here. There's some other underlying kind of baked good-like quality. This one has a little bit of a suggestion of caramelized kind of dark brown sugar and light brown sugar, both distinctly different. And that's kind of where these rich, deep fruit flavors are floating in the mix, but it's really secondary to that toffee and caramel characteristic. Really, I should say tertiary, because the bourbon is truly first. Then it's toffee caramel, and then it's underlying fruit characteristics. But anyway you slice it, truly delicious, absolutely well done. Just another remarkably well done barley wine. These are the types of beers that when I drink, I say, yeah, this is what got me into barley wine in the first place. And to their credit, they're even more complex, because the first barley wine I had was not barrel aged. Barrel aging really has only become super popular in the past few years, and I'm a big fan. I still like a non-barrel aged beer, but you get these added layers of complexity. Sure, does it drive cost up? You bet. It costs more to produce, and it takes more time, and it's holding space in their warehouse to do what they do with the beer. But I will happily pay that extra price for this additional complexity that you get in the beer. Not saying that non-complex beers are not worth endeavoring to seek out to drink and enjoy. Absolutely they are. But especially in something as big and bold and already naturally complex as a barley wine, I think that they are just a perfect match. The style matches the added complexity that the barrel aging brings to the table. And this is just another tremendous, tremendous example. Folks, I'm going to take my sweet time sipping on this, enjoying every last drop while I come up my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these delicious barley wines, we're going to get them ranked, starting with 50 West Brewing Company's Remus's Revenge 10 and 2. This was the bourbon barrel-aged barley wine of the bunch. 12.5% ABV on this one, based in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they have won with this beer both at the Great American Beer Festival and the World Beer Cup. So award-winning and well-deservedly so. So let's go through the numbers. Starting with the aroma, this was one of those classic, absolute pungent barrel-aged beers. Barley wines typically have a pretty pronounced aroma anyway. They don't always, but as a rule, you're going to expect to have a pretty pronounced aroma. This one did All the classic traits I would expect to find in a barley wine aroma were present, as well as a boatload of that bourbon barrel shining through. The aroma was fantastic. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the taste, again, this was just really well executed classic barley wine done right. Just layers of flavor complexity, interweaving in and out of each other, popping in and out, all the little subtleties that I really have come to love over many years about barley wine. And then yet again, coupled with this just absolutely fantastic bourbon barrel aging. As I stated, I don't know what type of barrels they used, how long they used, if it was different types rotated through different brands, but whatever they did well. The taste, phenomenal. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the body, this is very much classic barley wine, maybe a little bit heavier than your average, but certainly in the realm. Body gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel, kind of a similar story with the body. It was just a little bit thicker, a little bit more viscous than you would typically see in a barley wine, but not outside of the realm of normalcy. Mouthfeel also gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish, barley wines do in general typically have longer than average finishes because the intensity of the flavor is quite pungent. This was no exception, but this was even way longer than the norm and even longer than your average barrel-aged barley wine. Just all of the flavor intensity was so tremendous. That length on each finish was well over a minute. Every sip, you could still strongly taste the barrel and the underlying beer. Finish gets a 10 out of 10. Head and retention, barley wine's a little bit all over the board. You never really know what you're going to get, but typically they're quite effervescent. They'll start to form a head, they'll do okay, and then it'll kind of settle down and mostly disappear. This one did a bit of that, but it still had a nice bit of cling to the outside and a little nice creamy pad on top, so it was a little tighter than you typically see. Head retention does get a 10 out of 10. Appearance-wise, this was textbook barley wine, that caramelly dark brown, 10 out of 10. For the balance, overall, I really enjoyed the balance of this beer. The only thing I could say was I found myself really wishing that I got a little more of the malt backbone coming through to cut through some of that bourbon. And it was delicious, but just from a balance perspective, I would have liked a little more of those classic kind of toffee and caramel notes to come through a little more prevalently than they did. That said, I only docked 1 point here. It gets a 9 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, I loved it. This is just a very well done barley wine. Highly recommend this one. Personally, 10 out of 10 for me. Finally, as an example of the style, this beer swept it in all categories but one. It does get a 10 out of 10, which brings the total score on 50 West Brewing Company's Remus's Revenge 10 and 2 to a 99 out of 100. Just about as good as it gets for a barley wine. Moving on to beer number 2. This is Varietal Beer Company's Sovereign of Nockmaar. This was the whiskey barrel-aged barley wine, 13.8% ABV on this one. Varietal Beer Company is based in Sunnyside, Washington State. Aroma on this one, yet again, very pungent classic barley wine. All of the underlying aromas, classic that I expected, for the most part I got. Pungency was also there. The whiskey came through very clearly as well. That said, it was not quite as pungent as many barley wines that I've had. It's not out of the realm of normalcy. It didn't miss the mark by much, but just a tick. I docked 1 point here. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the taste, overall I really enjoyed the taste. Much bigger beer than the prior in terms of ABV. 1.3% doesn't sound a lot, but is statistically significant. I did expect this to be even more pungent than the first one. I was actually kind of surprised that it wasn't. Don't get me wrong, compared to your normal beer, the pungency levels are really off the charts by comparison. But compared to other barley wines, this one not quite as intense as the average. It didn't miss the mark by much though, and the flavors I did get were really delicious. Overall, 9 out of 10 from me. For the body, this one was textbook barley wine, exactly what I expected, 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel, same story as with the body. The resistance level, viscosity level was exactly what I expected. Gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish on this one really did surprise me. The flavors, quite bold. As I stated, not as bold as on the first or as many barley wines, but it's still a barley wine, so the flavors are quite pungent. I expected that finish to just go crazy long, as typically happens on a barley wine. This one was above average, but it wasn't even as long as on this first beer here. It does get a 7 out of 10. Moving to head and retention. This one was textbook. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the appearance, almost identical in appearance to the first. It was textbook, gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this one, I enjoyed the balance on it. It was well above average. But again, for me, I found that the barrel aging maybe just was a little too intense to let the subtleties of the beer style speak. And that's not so much a criticism on either beer, because personally I'm a fan. It's just in terms of the grand scheme of balancing, it probably could be dialed in a little more fine-tuned. But that being said, well above average. Balance on this one does get an 8 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible? Overall, I really enjoyed this beer. Just a couple minor nitpicks, but I didn't dock but 1 point here. Very enjoyable barley wine. It gets a 9 out of 10. Finally, is an example of the style. Overall, here we are. Another barley wine with pretty good high scores across the board. Lost a few points in a few categories. Nothing too critical, and very enjoyable beer. Overall example of the style, I give it a 9 out of 10, which brings the total score on Varietal Beer Company's Sovereign of Nockmaar to a 91 out of 100. So sure, an 8-point gap sounds pretty big, but look, both beers are in the 90s. This doesn't happen with most beers. They're not going to be rated that high, and not even most barley wines. These both excellent. If you are a fan of barley wine and or barrel-aged beers, these are two distinctly different barley wine drinking experiences, and I would highly recommend either of them. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, just click that notification bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.